Okay, we're still getting set up for the woman at the well, for Jesus meeting the woman at the well. And we're not going to get to it yet because there's a lot that goes into it. It's one of my favorite stories by far, but there's a lot of preliminary stuff that you need to know the impact of this story. So we're in chapter 4, and I'll just repeat verse 4 and 5. They had to go through. Now he had to go through Samaria, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Verse 6, Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour. And the 6th hour is noontime, so in the heat of the day, and that sort of sets the setting for what's about to happen. But there's more that we need to look at, and the well is one of the biggest things that if you were a Jewish person well versed in the scriptures, which most of them were, as soon as you knew that this was Jacob's well, that would have told you something pretty important. And Jacob's well, and actually the stories from the Old Testament, way back in Genesis and Exodus, anytime there is a well and a young woman and a young man, those stories, there are 3 major stories. One about Isaac meeting Rebekah, one about Jacob meeting Rachel, and one about Moses meeting Zipporah at the well. All 3 of them are get married. So this is the courtship place. This is the place where you meet your future wife or husband. And that's what these stories, I mean, everyone would have known that. So this is really loaded here. The story, when Jesus shows up alone with this woman and has this conversation, this is all in the background. So we need to know that. Let's just take a quick look at some of those references. And I would definitely read these stories. They're a little longer, so we're not going to read through them all on this video. But the Isaac story is in Genesis chapter 24. Just got to find it here. So in Genesis 24, Abraham sends out servants, and one servant in particular, I think, to find Isaac a mate from his own people. So Abraham doesn't have a lot of, where he's at, he doesn't have a lot of his own kinsmen. So his servant comes back to the area of Haran, where others were living, to find a mate for his son. So it's Genesis 24, and it's verse 15. Before he was praying, so in verse 12 he says, Lord God of my master Abraham, give me success today and show kindness to my master Abraham. And he says, I'm standing here at the spring, at this well, and the daughters are coming out to draw water. May it be when I see a girl that I'll ask, may I have a drink? And she says, drink, and I'll water your camels, that this will be the one that has been chosen for your servant Isaac. So this is the formula here. The servant prays that when I say this, please give me a drink, that the one that I ask this of, if she gives me a drink, then that will be the one he will marry. So this is really important, right? This is big. And then 15, before he'd finished praying, Rebecca came out with a jar on her shoulder. And then she was very beautiful. She was a virgin, it tells us that. And then it doubles down and said she had never lain with any man. She comes down to the spring, fills her jar, and the servant hurries up to meet her and says, please give me a drink from your jar. And she says, drink, my lord. And she waters... And she says, I'll draw water for your camels too. So she waters the camels. And after all this, she meets her father, and they find out that they're all, related. She's a cousin, which is perfect for the Old Testament. And they arrange this marriage between Isaac and Rebekah. So that's what happens the first time. The second time is Jacob, right? So this is Isaac's son. Jacob has run off after he's stolen his brother's birthright. He's stolen his father's blessing. He's basically, on the run, but he goes into that same area where the well is, and where is it? verse 1, chapter 29 of Genesis. So Jacob continued on his journey. He came to the land of the eastern peoples. He saw a well in the field with 3 flocks of sheep lying there. And then it goes on to say that they had a stone over it, and then he had to remove the stone in order to get water. And Jacob asked the shepherds, where are you from? We're from Haran. And they replied, and he says, do you know Nahor's grandson, Laban? And they said, yep, and here's his daughter Rachel coming with the sheep. And so he wants the water. The shepherds refuse him. And when Rachel gets there, Jacob saw Rachel, went over, rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well, waters the sheep for her. And Jacob kisses Rachel at the well, and then they both weep, and he meets Laban, his uncle, and they agree that they'll be married. So that's the story from Genesis 29. So at the well, again, just like Isaac and then Jacob, they meet their mate. Right? And then Moses in Exodus chapter 2, verse 15, same thing. Basically, Moses is running away from Pharaoh in Egypt after he kills the slave master. And he goes to Midian. So it's a different well, but it's just south of that same area. He sits down by a well, and the priest had 7 daughters. They came to draw water and fill their troughs. Shepherds came along and drove the girls away. But Moses comes to their rescue and takes their animals and waters them. And when they return to their father Jethro says, who was this guy? And they said, go invite him to be with us. And then Moses comes to eat with them, and he gives Zipporah to Moses to marry her right there. So at the well, Moses meets the 7 sisters and then sees Zipporah too. And then Jethro, the father, gives Zipporah to Moses to marry. So there's the story. There's the setup. And so you can imagine that when Jesus comes to the well, and the first thing he says to her is, give me a drink, right? He sets in motion this formula that is all about marriage, right? The other thing, I got to go back to John. I just lost my place. But the other thing is that one of the last things that John says, John the Baptist, right before this, John says, the bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him, and his voice is full of joy he is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine and is now complete. So John the Baptist is saying the bridegroom is here, right? We had the wedding at Cana in chapter 2. Now John is talking about Jesus as the bridegroom. And the next thing that happens is Jesus is at the well, where this is Old Testament lines this up. This is a courtship ritual. John has just named him the groom, the bridegroom, and here he is with this woman at the well. And, the first thing he says is, give me a drink, just like Genesis 24. And the woman is astute enough to say, what the heck are you doing, Jesus? She doesn't even know his name. She says, what the heck are you doing? This is a big problem, what you're doing. You're a Jew. I'm a Samaritan. This isn't right. So it's a huge setup for everyone who would read this story, if they knew the Old Testament well, would say this is a courtship ritual, right? We don't usually read it that way because we kind of read it all on its own. We don't know the background. One other story that's important is the story from 1 Kings. What is it? What's the 1 Kings 17, verses 10 through 11. 1 Kings 17, 10 through 11. That's good to read. Is Elijah and the widow. Because Elijah, as the prophet, comes to the widow and says, make me some food. It's kind of like, give me a drink. And then their engagement, not for a wedding, but the relationship that Isaiah and this widow have leads to some miraculous signs. And so Jesus is sort of connected to that through the fact that He does the similar thing that Isaiah does in the asking for something from her. So Jesus kind of comes off as both a bridegroom at the well and as a prophet at the well. And both of those come up in the conversation with this woman, this unnamed Samaritan woman at the well. So this is some of the background. I need to get that, sort of set that down before we actually read the story. So read the book. Read the Genesis 24, 15 through 21, Genesis 29, 1 through 14, Exodus 2, 15 through 22, and get the sense of this courtship ritual at the well. And we'll pick it up later with the conversation. Thanks.